The Sabbath. It should be relatively simple to discuss due to the plainness of the subject, but an ancient adversarial campaign to deceive the world has made it less so. What is explicitly stated by the Creator himself, and is as clear as crystal to a toddler, somehow manages to escape the most seasoned adults, and has landed on the list of top 5 things that neo-Christians and Sinaticists disagree on. To illustrate, asking the average modern, or rather neo-Christian, to tell you about the Sabbath, their responses will likely include some form of a day of worship instituted by God. No argument there. However, things can get a bit squirrely when they begin conferring the details of this decree, and their answers to follow-up questions tend to grow increasingly vague. Comparatively, a 6-year-old, when told that the Sabbath is the 7th day of the week, and then asked which day they should worship, responds Saturday, even though they may have to count the days on their fingers. Now, a brief look into the origin of the Sabbath quickly returns an overview of the creation of the earth and the 4th commandment to remember the Sabbath and keep it holy. This command appears simple enough. However, gaining an understanding of what keeping it holy looks like requires a tad more research. That aside, the first piece is clear. We are to remember it, meaning the Sabbath should never fall from our memories. This introduces the fact that it is an everlasting ordinance, a sign of solidarity between the Creator and His creation. But neo-Christians claim otherwise, and have formulated their arguments to do several things: to discount the importance of the Sabbath, to say that the 7th-day Sabbath is only for the Jews, to advocate for an any day can be the Sabbath day model of worship, to suggest that Christ is the new Sabbath, nullifying the old Sabbath, and even to posit that the Sabbath was changed to the first day by God or by Paul. They can't quite keep that one straight. At any rate, if you were to give this topic a bit more attention, it wouldn't take long to rebut these claims. One simply needs to establish context, then reread the passages used as proof text in their proper context. Let's take a walk through these patristical arguments, shall we? First up, the Sabbath is only for Jews. This is incorrect. Historical findings prove that even the Babylonians observed a 7th-day Sabbath. It was somewhat identical to what was given to Adam, who was not a Jew. He passed this commandment down through generations to Noah and his sons. Again, simple enough, but if we want to go further, Yeshua reminds the Pharisees that the Sabbath was intended for all nations to observe, as a sign of the Adamic covenant and Yah's relationship with the humans He created. Despite this fact, the Sabbath somehow became an exclusively Hebraic practice, tied to the Jews' identity and theirs alone. Even early patristics at one time observed the Sabbath. Apostolic patristic Ignatius makes mention of this in his letter to the Magnesians. He encouraged followers to still observe the Sabbath, but in a way that distinguished them from the Jews. It wasn't until much later that patristics decided they didn't want to be associated with the Jews at all, and they removed the Sabbath altogether. Here's what they said: Christians must not Judaize by resting on the Sabbath, but must work on that day. A Christian shall not stop work on the Sabbath, but on the Lord's day. Here the fathers order that no one of the faithful shall stop work on the Sabbath, as do the Jews. We can see plainly from their writings that they made no effort to disguise their intent. So, however popular this belief of a Jews-only Sabbath, it isn't supported anywhere in the scriptures. Instead, the patristics' own writings testify to the true origin of the Lord's Day observance, proving it inferior to the day ordained by the Creator. Next, man's Sabbath is in Jesus. I'll be honest, I'm not entirely sure what this means, and I'm not convinced that neo-Christians have a strong grasp of it either. Regardless, the interpretation is wildly reaching as proof of the abolition of Yah's holy day of rest. In the books of Matthew, Mark, and Luke, the authors recount that the Messiah, when his disciples are accused of breaking the Sabbath, says that the Sabbath was made for man, and not man for the Sabbath, and so the Son of Man is Lord of the Sabbath. What he's saying is that man has authority over the Sabbath, not the other way around, and therefore can use his discretion on how it is to be observed, as long as he does not alter the essence of the command. Reading the source text, Yahshua uses the Aramaic word varnash, which is used to mean man and Son of Man. Son of Man was a general term for the offspring of Adam, in addition to being used colloquially to refer to Yahshua. Based on the context of the interaction between the Messiah and these Pharisees, we know he's not talking about himself in this instance. We know this because the Pharisees aren't accusing him of violating the Sabbath commandment. They are accusing his students, and his reply is in defense of them. So, the Son of Man is the son of Adam, which is to say, mankind. For some reason, this word does not appear in modern exegetical analyses, and therefore has caused much confusion for those wanting to understand what the Messiah said in this verse. The last argument I'll address here is perhaps the most commonly used. The Sabbath was nullified by a man named Paul. Patristics use two passages as proof texts for this position. We'll deal with Colossians chapter 2 and verse 16 first. It seems profound, and skillful evangelists can make it sound right, but the end thereof is death. In his epistle to the Colossians, Paul is reassuring and reinforcing the Messianic Jews who, at that time, were being pressured by Pharisees to adhere to halakha laws. These are unbiblical oral traditions formulated by men, but asserted as divine law. The Pharisees, for those unaware, were a sect of Jews that infused angel worship among other abominable acts into Jewish belief. So, what Paul says to the Colossians is that they are complete in their faith in Yahshua and don't need to concern themselves with these traditions and rituals. To properly understand Colossians 2:16, you have to first read verses 8 through 13, where he ridicules the Pharisees' teachings as high-sounding nonsense and points out that they are derived from human thinking and the spiritual powers of this world. Now, this is perhaps a novel approach, but books, letters, essays, etc. are better understood when read in their entirety, starting at the beginning, so that the author's intended message isn't lost. The other passage used to support this idea of a non-existent Sabbath is Romans chapter 14 and verse 5. The days Paul mentions in this passage are not made plain, and this ambiguity has allowed many theologians to assume he's talking about the Sabbath day, which conveniently supports their presuppositions. We Sinaiticists disagree with this notion, and here's why. In his letter to the assembly in Rome, Paul talks about food and drink and the abstinence from foods, but does not make any mention of the Sabbath at all. How does this verse then prove that the Sabbath has been nullified? Shouldn't the proof be more obvious? That is, if we're being instructed to change the way we observe an explicit commandment, wouldn't those instructions be well defined? Conversely, what is offered in these two sentences doesn't come close to what would be expected with such a major revision of the most important legislation in human history. Yah does not typically leave these sorts of things open to interpretation, as it would cause confusion, and the fact that we even have debates on this topic is evidence of that. This kind of obscure and apocryphal messaging is just not like him. Yah lets us know for certain what he expects, so that there is no excuse for disobedience. If there's any evidence of the Sabbath being nullified, this ain't it. You can scour the Old Testament writings, but will never find, whether in prophecy or otherwise, signs that the Sabbath would be abolished. Again, one would expect a change of this magnitude to be prophesied, but it isn't found in any of the prophetical books. So perhaps it was a contingency. But here's the thing, Yah doesn't mention it at all. Not even through his son, Yeshua. This is clear enough to conclude that the Sabbath remains unchanged. However, neo-Christians promote the idea that we need to piece together clues and vague suppositions to reach our own conclusions on the validity of this day. The one day that was given to be a sign of our connection to the Creator of all things. The Sinaitic community prefers to take a more concrete approach to obeying this command, as it was given at Mount Sinai. We don't subscribe to the idea that the seventh-day Sabbath has been canceled in any form, because it wasn't. One of the goals of this essay is to dispel the myths of neo-Christianity, so that some may escape the shackles of Satan's deception. You see, humans decide how they worship God based on what they are led to believe, and the majority of religious leaders have been enlisted to circulate Satan's demonic message to their congregants. As a result, most humans are making the wrong decisions. Each week, churchgoers are lied to when invited and encouraged to show up on the first day of the week to demonstrate their devotion to the Creator. In this way, the population of humans that choose to worship the God of the Bible are led to the slaughterhouse. This is not an exaggeration. The effects of this Sabbath lie, and the subsequent lies that are told to support it, have a ripple effect. It doesn't just impact the day they choose to worship. Oh no. The entire system of beliefs and its traditions are corrupted beyond recognition. As I said in the beginning of this essay, this campaign to oppose the Creator is as ancient as the earth itself, and so Satan has had nothing but time to curate a sophisticated cycle of human iniquity. That is the global order in place today. What may seem disconnected and appear as separate operating structures, regional cultures, or governments, is in fact a singular adversarial organism, intelligently designed to oppose the Creator in all things, in order to turn Yah's creation against their Father, and ultimately condemn them to death for eternity. All is not lost, of course. We still have the power to choose how we worship, and when we have all the facts, we typically make the best choices. So it is my hope that this and other writings produced by our Sinaitic community will lead you and others like you to improve your decision-making processes. I urge you to choose truth over tradition and decide today to join us in observing the next Sabbath and set aside an entire day to rest.
Shalom, brothers and sisters, and welcome to another week of Sinaitic Podcasts and Essays. My name is Dr. Arya Ben Nasik, and joining me today is Sister Lael Bat Yisrael. Shalom, my sister. How you doing?
Shalom. I'm doing really well.
I want to thank you for taking a moment to sit down with us to discuss your essay titled A Day to Rest. This was a very edifying essay for me. I listened to it probably 3 times, and I have a lot of notes, and I'm going to be asking you questions that my audience want to ask you. All right?
Okay.
You are a trained behavioral scientist, and what I want to understand is as a trained behavioral scientist, what was your approach at looking at this topic, the Sabbath, a day to rest? I mean, granted, you're a Sinaticist, so I know the theological piece, right? But looking at it from a behavioral perspective. Can you kind of talk to me about that?
In what aspect you're asking about?
Yeah, when we talk about the Sabbath and the behaviors that the Most High is trying to regulate and kind of conduct on the Sabbath, from your training, do you have any, bird's eye view, any eagle eyes into this particular, topic and what Elohim is trying to achieve?
Yeah,
see what caught my attention was behavior, right? And so that's the reason why I want to throw that ball into your court, right?
And it's all behavior, it's all meant to control, regulate, correct our behavior.
Okay.
And even with this one, the Sabbath, it's still correcting behavior.
Okay.
Because if you look at the way that we operate today in this dispensation, for those that do not believe in a Sabbath, they work all day, every day.
Okay.
There's what we have now, hustle culture.
Okay.
Where people work all of the time. They don't stop. And they glorify the fact that they get maybe 2-3 hours of sleep a night. So the Sabbath, it seems like it's just a day to rest.
Okay.
But it's actually still regulating our behavior.
Okay.
In order to preserve our lives.
Okay. All right. So then this opens the door for my next question. When and why did Yah ordain the Sabbath?
The Sabbath was ordained. It was one of the very first things that Elohim did.
Okay.
After he created the earth, he rested on the seventh day.
Okay.
And because of that, he ordained it the Sabbath.
Okay.
Said it's a day to rest. I rested, so my people are going to rest as well.
Okay. Elohim worked for 6 days. Then he rested. On the seventh day, sanctified and made it holy. Kadosh. He separated the seventh day. This one day out of a 7-day week, he separated from 6 preceding days. So what does it mean to keep the Sabbath holy then? I mean, if we're using the term kadosh, sanctified, separated, hence holy, what does that mean as it relates to the Sabbath?
So the Sabbath is the day that Elohim rested. It's a day that we are commanded to rest.
Okay.
It's a day that serves as a sign between the Creator and his creation that they belong together.
Okay.
Right? You are my people. I'm your God. So it's a sign between the two.
Okay.
Keeping it holy, we look to him for that. He rested, so we rest from our work, our labor.
Okay.
It's not talking about just doing anything, right? You're not expected to just sit in a couch and become lethargic.
Okay.
He's saying any servant labor, any servile work. So what you do as your occupation.
Okay.
Now I understand that might bring up some questions.
Yeah.
Some people who they have to work.
Right. Like
regardless.
A police officer.
Police officers, doctors, they have to work regardless of what day it is. There are provisions for that.
Okay.
And I think we'll get into that a little bit later.
Okay.
But there are freedoms when it comes to the Sabbath and how we observe the Sabbath. Elohim, his main focus is preserving life, right? Because like I mentioned, making us rest is something that he has to do. Otherwise, we'll just keep working, and that's not good for us.
Okay. All
it's not healthy.
Okay. So let me chime in on that. You go to the doctor. The doctor asks, "Are you getting enough rest? Are you getting enough sleep? Right? Or you're working too much? Right? You need to take a vacation. Nafash, you need to take a breath." The Most High, in his infinite wisdom, knows all of these things
already.
So the Most High is essentially saying to mankind, but specifically Adam, because Adam is the first man that was created, Adam, I'm creating a garden temple. I am creating a job for you, which is to maintain the garden.
Yes.
Right? And I want you to maintain this garden 6 days a week. And on the 7th day, I want you to rest because I rested. Right?
Correct.
So, okay, so then this is just going to slide right into my next question because it comes from Mark 2:27 and verse 28. So it's Mark 2:27 through 28. What did Yeshua mean when he said that the Sabbath was made for man and not man for the Sabbath, and that the Son of Man is Lord of the Sabbath? My understanding where I was coming from in my former life, so to speak, was that I never understood the passage that the Sabbath was made for man and not man for the Sabbath. What we really focused upon was that the Son of Man is Lord of the Sabbath. In other words, Yeshua, before he came to earth in the form of a human being, existed as God in the Spirit. He gave the Sabbath to Adam. He gave the Sabbath to the Jews from Mount Sinai. When he comes to earth, he is saying, I am Lord of the Sabbath. I have obligated the Sabbath as I gave it to you from Genesis to Malachi. You all can do anything that you want to do now. You have permission to do anything you want to do on the Sabbath. You don't have to keep the 7th day holy, as I told you in Genesis, or as I told you in Exodus and Leviticus, and as I told you in Jeremiah. You can do anything you want to now on the Sabbath. You can work, 8 hours on the Sabbath, 9 hours on the Sabbath, 15 hours on the Sabbath, because I am Lord of the Sabbath. Now, that is what I was taught. I know you're going to kick that back, but first, help me understand what Yeshua is saying, that the Sabbath was made for man and not man for the Sabbath.
What Yeshua is saying is that, and it's exactly that. It's very simple terms, but if we put aside the eisegesis, trying to see what we want to see in the passage, right? Let all of our former teachings go and really just read what he's saying.
Okay.
The Sabbath was made for man, not man for the Sabbath.
Okay.
Adam was created to work the land. He was created to work, but not all of the time. He was created to work, and then he was given a day to rest. It's his day to rest, to do what he wants to do what he feels like doing, as long as it's not work, it's not laborious.
Okay.
Because that part is important. Like we mentioned, it's important that we get enough rest. So that was a provision that Elohim made sure that he instituted.
Okay.
What Yeshua is saying in when he says the Son of Man is Lord of the Sabbath.
Okay, now I just want to pause right there. I'm going to jump to that here in a second. I just want to summarize what you just said here. Okay. So let's see. The Sabbath was made for man and not man for the Sabbath. So can I look at it from this perspective? The Sabbath serves me. I do not serve the Sabbath.
Yeah.
Okay.
Exactly.
All right. Yah made me, and Yah commanded me to work in his garden, and he gave the Sabbath to me. He gave it to me. He didn't make the Sabbath and then said, man, I now want you to serve it.
Right.
I made the Sabbath. Yes, I sanctified the Sabbath, but I gave it to you as a gift so that you could rest and relax and refresh yourself upon.
Correct.
So, I mean, it just came to mind. Sorry to interrupt you. I know you're going to go into, Son of Man as Lord of the Sabbath, but it just clicked. The Sabbath serves me. I don't serve the Sabbath.
Right.
But I do need to be mindful that the Most High said that it's holy.
Mm-hmm.
And we're defining that holiness, or at least acknowledging that it's holy, by not working on this day.
Correct.
That's what the ordinance is.
Yes.
Got it. Okay. What about Son of Man as Lord of the Sabbath? Sorry to interrupt you. I know you're about
Not at all.
to jump in on that.
Not at all. I appreciate it because it helps having a different perspective. Someone says something a different way.
Yeah.
It clicks.
Mm-hmm.
But yes, so the Son of Man is Lord of the Sabbath.
Mm-hmm.
The part that people get confused with is that Son of Man.
Okay.
That phrase right there, Son of Man.
Yep.
That is a phrase that is used to refer to Yeshua,
Yeah.
the Son of Man.
Yeah.
So, person who is just reading
Mm-hmm.
and just reading, not really studying, just
Right.
reading, is going to see Son of Man and they're going to say, oh, that's talking about Yeshua, talking
Right.
about the Messiah.
Right.
But that's not exactly correct,
Okay.
because the Son of Man, translated from the Aramaic word
Mm-hmm.
Barnash.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Barnash is used to say Son of Man. But Son of Man does not just mean the Messiah. Son of Man is also used to mean the Son of Adam,
Right.
which is
Mankind.
mankind, all of mankind.
Okay.
So when you reread his statement with that new knowledge, you see mankind
Is Lord of the Sabbath.
is Lord of the Sabbath.
Wow. Wow. Okay. All right. So let's just go back. Sabbath was made for man and not man for the Sabbath. Elohim was generous enough, gracious enough, loving enough to say, hey, I want man to work the earth, to till the soil, but I only want him to do it for 6 days. I want him to rest on the seventh day. I'm going to give him my Sabbath, right? Elohim says throughout Exodus, this is my Sabbath. These are my Sabbaths, and I am inviting you into my Sabbaths. Therefore, you keep the ordinance as I have instructed you to observe them. And then Yeshua says that the Sabbath day was not made, he says that the Son of Man is Lord of the Sabbath, which means that mankind has mastery over the Sabbath.
Exactly.
Right. Okay.
So the two now go together. You see it.
Yeah.
The Sabbath was made for mankind, who is master of the Sabbath.
Wow. They don't teach this.
They don't.
Like this in Neo-Christian Lael.
They don't.
And this creates a lot of problems.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, are there any biblical passages that demonstrate that the Sabbath was practiced in the New Testament? You got any passages to support? Because again, we're looking at Christ. We're looking at Christendom, Christianity. We should be holding our convocations on Sunday. Venerable Day Solis, the honorable day of the sun. Yeah.
Yeah. No, and it's a good question to ask, because I know it's really just geared towards the Neo-Christian belief. And they only read the New Testament.
Right.
So in the New Testament, we see in Acts 17 that there is a custom to go to the synagogue on the Sabbath.
Okay.
And there's no other Sabbath than the one that was ordained.
That's right.
In Genesis.
That's right.
The seventh day.
That's right.
Up to that point, nothing changed.
Right. Okay.
No one came in and changed the Sabbath day. So, and that's in Acts. In Luke 4 and 16, we see the same thing.
Okay.
And it's mentioned again in John chapter 9.
Okay.
So in the New Testament, the Sabbath is still very much in play.
Okay. All right.
And again, no one changed it to the first day. It was not changed.
Okay. All right. You helped us out with Sabbath was made for man, and Son of Man is Lord of the Sabbath. Okay. You just, breezed through that one. But I think I think I'm going to challenge you. I think I'm going to challenge you on this one. I have a challenging question for you. Colossians 2:16. What does Paul mean when he says, do not be concerned about those who judge you for not keeping the Sabbath? Colossians 2:16 is a neo-Christian passage that's used to abrogate the Sabbath, the weekly Sabbath. It seems to suggest that if we are in the Messiah's body as believers, we no longer have to be mindful of the command to observe the Sabbath, right? And I'm quite sure you're going to push back on that.
Oh, absolutely. Because that's not at all what he's saying.
Okay.
But when you look at what he actually says, right? Don't be concerned about those who judge you. Who is he talking to? He's talking to his assembly in
Colossae. Right?
Colossae. Thank you. And he's talking about another group, those, right? So there's you, and then there's those.
Okay.
Who's those?
The Colossians is one group, right? And then we have antagonizers.
There's another group,
Okay, who are calling those. All right. Okay, got it.
So what are those saying? Who are they? And what are they saying? So it's like you taught us, you have to understand who the author is talking to and what are they saying? What are they talking about in order for you to understand what is being said? And so the assembly in Colossae is being pressured into holocausism and asceticism.
Okay.
And these are two things that are adding and taking away from the ordinances that Elohim established.
Okay.
Right?
Okay.
Holocausism is just adding.
Right.
Don't do this. Don't do. You can't walk this. This many steps. On the Sabbath.
That's right.
So many things we can get into it. That's a whole other podcast episode.
Yeah. You can't write with ink unless it's dissipating ink. You can't walk any further than what, I don't know, is it 2,000 feet or something? You can't tie a knot that requires two hands to untie. Yeah. Right.
Who is that for?
Right.
And where do you find that in the Torah? It's not in the Torah.
Right.
It's man-made. So that's the thing that Paul is trying to warn this assembly about, is all of the man-made ordinances, all of these things that are coming from other men. Okay. Well, you mentioned asceticism, earlier too. And so we're talking about depriving ourselves of, good food, good drink, entertainment, Abstinence.
fun, abstinence, etc. So you believe that there are multiple antagonists who are trying to impose upon the Colossian assembly their ideas of righteousness and holiness, etc.
Their ideas on how to observe the Sabbath.
What gives you that confidence that this is what Paul is responding to? I mean, because I don't mean to be funny, but I'm looking at multiple commentaries on this, Sister Lael, Colossians 2:16, and these are world-renowned scholars. They're all talking about the abrogation of not just the Sabbath, but they're also talking about the abrogation of the dietary code, the abrogation of the new moons and the Moedim, the holy days, right? So respectfully, your view is not the majority view. Your view is not the minority view. You are very much an outlier. So, I mean, look, how can you be confident that this is really what Paul is talking about? Where is your exegesis coming from?
So it's a little disappointing. These scholars aren't really reading their own scholarship. You're looking at the source text, right? The source language. And you see the words being used, and what they're talking about are things that are man-made.
Okay.
right? So there are two Greek words that are being used.
Okay.
Stoicheia.
Okay. That's Greek, yeah. I think that means stoicheia, basic principles, basic ideas, basic concepts, elements.
Yeah.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
But it has nothing to do with the Torah. It's not talking about the law as it was given.
Okay.
It's just talking about the basic principles of human tradition.
Okay. All right.
The other word that's being used is dogmatizo.
Okay.
Listeners may be familiar with the word dogma.
Right. That's right.
And dogma is always referring to human laws, human traditions, human ordinances. It doesn't come from the creator at all. In every instance that word is used, it's talking about human interference.
Okay. All right.
So when we have that in context, what Paul is talking about, he's talking about these principles, these ordinances, this dogma that comes from men. He's not talking about the Sabbath that was given by Elohim.
Okay.
In the very beginning, he's not talking about that.
Okay.
He's talking about these man-made things that are being pressed upon this assembly.
Okay. All right. Okay, so let me just recap here. Dogmatizo. Paul is using dogmatizo here to represent human ordinances and traditions. The term is never associated with any of Elohim's commandments or the law, right?
Correct.
So we have dogma, which is often used in the New Testament, but dogma is always used in the sense of human decrees, human ordinances, human commands. And then, of course, we have its cognate dogmatizo. So, okay, all right. So lexically, you begin to build your confidence, right? That Paul is talking about human tradition. Asceticism is a human tradition. And I think when Paul begins to bring up this argument somewhere around Colossians 2:8, he talks about philosophy, right? Philosophy, the love of wisdom. So this is something that human beings have constructed and are imposing upon other individuals. This is being defined by Paul as stoicheia, right? Okay. So you're looking at this lexically, and you're also looking at this thematically, because the theme seems to be to stay away from everything that man has introduced you to, in contradistinction to the body of the Messiah. Is that correct?
That is exactly it. And when you have themes from multiple books throughout the chapters of each of these books, and they're all coming together saying the same thing, that's where the confidence comes from.
Okay.
But when it's, it's very staccato. You have a book that's talking about this supposedly, and another book that's talking about something else and something else. It's not really fitting together to make a cohesive picture.
Okay.
But this right here, when you understand that this is the theme, this is what Yeshua came and preached against.
Okay.
Right? He's talking about all the things that were imposed on the people.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. Oh, okay. I'm sorry.
You're right.
So that's a home run. So Yeshua, all right. So Natelet Yadayim, it is the washing of hands, the traditions of washing of hands. Yeah. Okay. So the Pharisees approach Yeshua and they ask him, why do your disciples transgress the traditions of the elders, because they do not wash their hands before they eat?
There it is.
Right. Okay. Yeshua responds, why do you transgress the commandments by your traditions? So these traditions that Yeshua is rejecting are halakhic traditions.
Yes.
And you stated earlier that when we look at the Colossian community, we have multiple antagonizers. One of them we refer to as, let's just say, Judaizers. What they're trying to do is impose halakhic tenets upon the assembly that Yeshua rejected.
Correct.
Right. Okay. I'm sorry I had to break into that because you just caused that bell to ring.
It's okay. It's okay. It's okay. And it's all for good.
Right.
Because it's making my point that it's the same theme throughout.
Right. Yeah.
Yeshua was talking about the same things. Paul isn't talking about anything different. He's not saying anything different.
Lyle, that is so revealing. All right. So, okay, what we have as believers in the Mashiach, as Messianic Sinaticists, what we have is all that we need. I don't need halakhism. I don't need philosophy. I don't need asceticism, right? If we have a place in the body of the Mashiach, we have salvation, right? We have divine enlightenment. We procure our wisdom through it. Can I read a passage to you?
Absolutely.
Okay. I want to go over to Deuteronomy.
Okay.
Let's go over to Deuteronomy chapter. This is why I love interviewing you, because you just cause my mind to just go in every place here in scriptures. Deuteronomy chapter 6. So Yeshua was a Torah believing Israelite.
Oh yes.
Right? He was a Torah fundamentalist. John said, well, actually Yeshua said in John's gospel, whoever has the Son has the Father.
Yeah.
Whoever has not the Son does not have the Father. Right. So when I look at Deuteronomy chapter 6 and verse 24, and Yah commanded us to do all these statutes, to fear Yah our Elohim for our good always, that he might preserve us alive as it is at this day. And it shall be our righteousness if we observe to do all these commandments before Yah our Elohim as he has commanded us. Yeshua showed us how to walk righteously.
Yeah.
He moved us beyond the letter of the text into the spirit of the text. So now I'm understanding really the thrust of your essay, right? It is to get us to understand that Yeshua is the fulfillment of Elohim's Torah, in which we become if we are in the Messiah.
Yes.
Right? Okay, so okay, I know your husband's probably looking for you. So
the kids are keeping him busy. It's
okay,
all right.
All right. I'm going to go over to Deuteronomy chapter 10 and verse 12. And now, Yisrael, what does Yah your Elohim require of you but to fear Yah your Elohim, to walk in all his ways, and to love him, and to serve Yah your Elohim with all of your heart and with all of your soul, to keep the commandments of Yah to keep the commandments of Yah and his statutes, which I command you this day for your good. And I think I have one more here. It's looking for.
And while you're looking for that, what I love about Yeshua is that he personified the law.
Right.
Because what you have is you're looking at the letter, words on paper.
Right.
But what he did is he made it visual. This is what it looks like.
Okay.
When you're obeying, when you're observing all of the commandments as they were given, this is what it looks like.
Okay.
And Yah made sure that he co-signed on Yeshua when the Spirit came down on him. He said, "This
is my beloved Son, in whom I am well pleased. Hear him."
Here he is.
Yes.
Here he is. So now he's got eyes on him. Everybody's looking. And they're seeing what he's doing.
Right.
He doesn't look like the Pharisees.
Okay.
He doesn't look like the Essenes.
Okay.
But Yah says, there's no wrong in him. If you follow him, you'll do good.
Okay.
And so he came to show us what it was to do all of the commandments.
Okay.
And not be pressured by what holiness is supposed to look like according to the Pharisees.
Okay.
Because it was just
beautiful.
It got really messy.
Beautiful.
Really, really messy. Yeshua, just his presence cleared all of that up.
Well, in Deuteronomy chapter 4, we talked about Sophia, the love of wisdom, which is, we talked about philosophy, which means the love of wisdom. And again, when we look at Colossians chapter 2:16, we look at the passages that preceded it, primarily Colossians 2:8, where Paul is talking about philosophy and those who are being, those who are being enticed to follow these various philosophical schools, right? Whether it's, Stoicism or Platonism, Plato's, Aristotle, Socrates, etc. This is what Moses writes in Deuteronomy chapter 4, verse 6. Keep therefore, I'm going to start at verse 5. Behold, I have taught you statutes and judgments, even as Yah my Elohim commanded me that you should do in the land where you go to possess it. This is what's beautiful for me. Keep therefore and do them, for this is your wisdom. You don't need Greco-Roman philosophy.
Yes.
What you need is Torah. Keep therefore and do them, for this is your wisdom and your understanding in the sight of the nations which shall hear all these statutes and say, surely this great nation is a wise and understanding people. So when I go back and I look at Colossians, and I think we were talking about Colossians 2 and verse 8 here. Let me just go here because something just popped up. Colossians 2 and verse 8 through 10. And I'll close out on this one. Beware lest any man plunder you, spoil you through philosophy and vain deceit, after the tradition of men, after the rudiments of the world. These are the storkia, the elements of the world that emanate from men, and not after the Mashiach. Then Paul says, for in him dwelleth all the fullness of the Godhead bodily. In other words, within the Mashiach rests all of Elohim's authority. Verse 10, and you are complete in him, which is the head of all principality and power.
You don't need anything else.
You don't need anything else but the Mashiach. So you don't need the storkia that emanates from human ideology and philosophy, right? And whether that's asceticism, halakhism, that have been dogmatized, made into decrees and ordinances. That's a fair lockup on Colossians 2 and 16. Yeah, we kind of put the gravy on top of it.
Yeah, it did actually.
Okay. All right. Look, I know you got to go, and this is fun. This is extremely edifying for Sister Lael, and I just cannot express upon you how grateful we are for you to take the time out of your day, because I know that you have a husband you got to take care of, you got kids you got to take care of, you got a full-time job, you got to do mom, you got to run your errands, and now you got to come in, Tabernacle Elohim, sit down, and be kind of grilled. I thought I had you on some gotcha questions, but anyway, this was excellent. Way to break this down. This is beautiful.
Praise God.
What's the next essay you're working on? What did you got anything else in the hopper? Anything else?
I have to see.
Okay, all right, not a problem. I kind of felt you were going to say that. All right, everybody. That's it for us. We are done. Thank you, Sister Lael. And we want to thank everyone for tuning in to NCCI's Sinaitic Podcasts and Essays. Brothers and sisters, if you want more information pertaining to this topic, please visit our website or enroll in our Sinaitic Light Bible Study program, which is free to you. Sister Lael just kind of scratched the surface. Again, she's just doing an essay to summarize a composition that's just far more in depth that we just can't cover, quite frankly, in 30 minutes, in an hour, in 2 hours, in three hours. So please, if you'd like to, know more about this topic, this is a very controversial topic. Please contact us at 704-553-7625. You can visit our website at www.nccischarlotte.com. May the blessings of Yah be with you, and let's remain focused and diligent on imaging our Father Yah for His glory. Praise you, Yah. Everyone have a good day. Shalom.